welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And this week we are going to be looking at
the Melco N50-S38 digital music library.
Easy for you to say. That's a mouthful
No, it
and a half,
isn't.
isn't it? Excellent. So, I guess with that wonderful, incredible title, what is it?
It's a digital music library, Mike.
Of course it is, as it says on the tin.
Exactly. So, I mean, the interesting thing for me about this is that with computer audio, you've got two choices, really. You've got streaming, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Or you've got hard drive. Do you store your music on your own hard drive, either as a network-attached storage device, you know, a sort of bought-in hard drive which you keep under the stairs or wherever you want to, or do you actually just go and buy a Spotify or a Tidal or Qobuz subscription and give up on the idea of owning music yourself? So that's a very important question you've got to ask yourself before you even contemplate the purchase of this particular item.
And this is what we're talking about, by the way. This is it. Dare I say it's a little bit of an innocuous looking black box. On first impression, it doesn't seem to have lots of bells and whistles. That's because, well, it doesn't have lots of bells and whistles, really.
It's a very nicely made black box,
it is,
but it is very black spot.
It is indeed.
All the same, isn't it?
It is. And as you say, you're quite right. There are two ways of looking at this. So what I've been experimenting with recently is ripping some of my CDs.
Yep.
And I think what we've probably all done is stored our CDs somewhere. Maybe some of them are gathering dust because we've converted to Qobuz, we've converted to Tidal. So I've decided to rip some of my CDs onto this and onto the solid state hard drive in here, and see how it sounds.
Yeah.
And plugged in a DAC. And interesting point here, David. So on the rear panel here, if we can get a look of that, in terms of outputs, there's only one, and there's only a USB out.
Yeah.
So you can't do coax to DAC from here. You can't do Toslink to DAC.
Yeah.
You've got USB or USB.
USB is the way ahead, Grandad.
Well, there we go. There we go.
So Melco would have you believe, anyway.
Well, and absolutely, and they clearly must be very confident in that. And I'm sure they're thinking, they've spent a lot of money on all the hardware in here, because they started off as a hardware manufacturer, didn't they? And I think it was Buffalo, wasn't it? Who were the sister company, who were massive.
Yeah, I think parent company is better, but Melco was a sort of side project from Buffalo, as far as I know. It was first started by a guy called Makoto Maki.
You say that very well.
Yeah, because I've been to Japan a few times, and Melco, the brand, actually has been around for a long time, hasn't it?
Yes.
It's been around since the mid-70s, I think 1975. And
they used to do some wicked turntables.
Yeah.
Some really cool, really funky looking turntables.
I don't think we got many of them in the UK,
Sadly
but
not.
I think there was another turntable that was particularly popular that kept all the hi-fi journalists amused. So Melco is actually an acronym for Maki Engineering Laboratory Company. So it's an established brand, it's been around a long time. And the interesting thing was that in 2014, when I'd say computer audio was still had more of a kind of frontier spirit, more of a Wild West spirit. So far few people had settled into the idea of streaming at that time. So many more people were using hard drives as music storage. They launched their first so-called digital music library, and this is the latest version. Basically, the S38 is the latest one, and this one, the innovation, if you like, that this one brings is it also does streaming.
Yes.
So before, 2014, 2015, then it was a hardcore, hard drive only product, wasn't it?
Yes.
So you had your streamers and you had your Melco, and never the twain should meet. And the interesting thing is this integrates it.
It does, and I kind of get it, because there's a lot of hardcore Melco aficionados who love the solid state hard drives, and they understand that streaming has its own issues intrinsically, trying to get the music from the cloud to your speakers. There's lots of things in the way. So this kind of takes the things out of the way by storing it on very high quality SSDs with good power supplies and
Absolutely.
all of those wonderful things.
Exactly that. So they've optimized everything inside, for the kind of lowest possible jitter, the lowest possible noise, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
But
this one is Rune ready.
Yeah.
It works with UNPMP programs like Bubble, for example, from your Android device.
Yeah.
If you have an iPad, there's also Melco's own app. Now I don't, so I haven't tried that with this, but they've done it. They've got it. Whether they're going to roll it out to other Apple devices or Android,
you would hope so.
Remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But it's doing both. So this little box here does a bit of everything. I just want to talk briefly, if I may, just about the rest of the things on the back here. So we've got our kind of standard network input.
Yeah.
There's also, if we want to have this as a network player, there's a port for that as well.
So Ethernet's there.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, two of those, one in, one out.
Yep.
Then we've got a backup, which is actually quite useful. So you can do exactly what it says. So if you've got all of your valuable music stored on your hard drive here, you can just back it up to a hard drive, which this will format for you in its sort of native drive state. But actually, my Mac could read it, no problem at all. So it's not exclusive to the Melco. So actually, I could transfer files, which I found very easy, and I actually transferred files the other way as well.
Yeah.
And there's a USB 3 socket here. Now, what I did with this is I got a very standard Blu-ray drive and Blu-ray burner actually, which was powered, because I wasn't sure exactly how much power was going to be chucked out of this USB 3. Plugged it in, put a CD in, and the Melco software comes up immediately with, do you want to copy this album onto your Melco?
Yeah.
So it was really simple, really straightforward. It does it in either a WAV file or a FLAC file.
Yep.
You can choose which tracks you want to import, and then it stores it in its library, and it also goes online and downloads the album artwork as well. Yeah. So it's really neat. There's some neat stuff going on in here, without a shadow of a doubt. And also there's an expansion port on the back. So if you run out of hard drive space, you can actually plug in another. And also, I must say this, Melco do some peripherals too.
Yeah.
So they do their own burner, for example.
Right.
They do their own backup drive, etc. So you can bolt on the Melco stuff.
I think there's a 3 terabyte backup SSD, isn't there?
There is.
That you can, or additional SSD that you can put in. So I mean, I think that's a great point, that when you do, or if you do buy this, then there's a kind of whole ecosystem, really, isn't there? The sort of Melco ecosystem ready for you. And one of the attractions of it is that not everyone, surprisingly viewers, wants to get into the kind of equivalent of buying Micro Mart or whatever it is these days, and buy endless pieces, computer peripherals and all the rest of it, and piece it all together to make their own computer sound, music storage device. The Melco offers a different approach. It's all there on the plate. The software is all there, isn't it?
Yes.
It works really well.
Yeah.
It's all really nicely integrated. You don't need to sort of start taking the case off and changing dip switches and stuff. It's
Sure.
and I think that's a lot of the appeal of this, actually.
It is, and for me, the thing which I thought was terrific was the inherent built-in ripping software, which works really, really nicely. So you don't have to use third-party software to do it. Transfer your files onto a hard drive, transfer them into here. It just works really well. And it spotted my network streamer immediately. Worked really nicely. Played very nicely with a couple of DACs which I threw at it. Sounds very good. No two ways about it. And doing that all-important A/B comparison of streaming from, say, Qobuz, and playing from the Melco, trying to ensure that obviously we're doing a like for like bit rate, sample rate.
Same master of the
Exactly.
particular track.
This wins every time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
And you'd expect that because you're close to the source. There's fewer things in the way.
Yeah.
And things like network switches are inherently noisy. In fact, Melco make their own network switch as well, which is an expensive product, but it's it will be a sort of state-of-the-art network switch. So very, very cool. However, and I'm just going to just sort of put this in there a little bit, it's a little bit clunky to use, to be honest. And there's some buttons on the front, and there's four soft buttons here, and they're trying to access submenus and knowing which submenu does what. And just to give you an example, Dave, so if I want to swap from my input as my UPnP server on my phone to Rune, I have to go through hoops to do that. Yeah. And it's in menus you'd never consider. Yeah. So I was forever getting the manual out and trying to find out where, when and how. And it was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a sense that it's easier to use this if you've been through the whole kind of progression of using PCs from about 1983.
Yes.
And you kind of get used to the idea you have to go through particular menus or file structures and all the rest of it. Whereas if you come straight to a computer, onto a Mac, say, and Macs work seamlessly and they do what the graphical interface does. It tells them.
This is MS-DOS.
Yeah, exactly. This is sort of almost pre-Windows 95, isn't it?
It is.
In its kind of sense of operating.
Yes.
It is. How can I put this? You wouldn't really find it in John Lewis, with an ultra easy to use app so your granny could listen to her Val Dunican records.
Although I listen to mine.
Yes, but I heard you.
It's no lie.
But so there's a kind of geekiness to it. It's like
there is.
I mean, this is almost the contradiction of it. I think it's kind of designed to get you out of all these different computer peripherals and music computers and all the rest of it, but it still relies on that kind of basic principle of the sort of file structures and so on. There's no kind of drag and drop app.
No, sure, there isn't.
That works in that way.
No, and so as a result, and having used it for a while now, the way I used it was I used exclusively my Android device to drive it. I didn't actually use Rune with it because I didn't find it did quite what I wanted to within Rune. I used Bubble UPnP as my source of choice, my software programmer choice. And the reason why is because I could very easily through that see what was on the Melco.
Yeah.
And that sounds really obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But when I was in Rune, I couldn't work out whether I was playing it from the Melco or from Cobuz or Tidal.
Yeah.
But within the Bubble app, I can see exactly where I'm playing it from. A couple of really other things I really like baked in. It's also got you can put your details in, and you can subscribe to Cobuz or a couple of other high-res online services, and you can download straight to here.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
That is really
I really
cool.
like that.
Yeah.
So if you have a top of the range Cobuz subscription and you're paying lots of money, you can download straight to here.
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant feature actually.
It's fantastic.
But for some of us who still haven't given up on the idea of kind of owning music.
Yes.
Because you never know when the subscription service could go down or go bankrupt or decide that they don't like you and not let you download stuff or whatever.
100% right. So I hadn't even considered that. That's so true. Or may not even be available in your country.
Yeah, or the artist might boycott the streaming service, or whatever. So.
So I actually ended up buying a few CDs when we were listening to this, and just so I could download them on here and see how they sound, and I was really impressed. Yeah. It works an absolute treat. It's clearly a very very good transport.
Yeah.
I think paired with a good DAC, it would be great. Chord Hugo TT2, something like that, something of that ilk, would work. Beautifully
really
well
nice.
with it.
Yeah.
And it would probably complement it really well. But going back to this is a great source component. It should work well with pretty much every DAC.
Yeah.
So you could pair it with most things.
Yeah.
As long as we're getting the information out, then it should be doing a good job.
Yeah.
So
I think it's I think that the downside of it is that it's very expensive. So at the time of making this video, it's about £5,000 in the UK, and that is a lot of money for something that has a kind of large SSD 3.84 terabyte SSD drive and some fancy motherboards or whatever, and a streaming board. It's in terms of its sort of perceived value, I think it's poor, but I think that as you get to use it, and if you are a certain person who uses music and in a certain way, digital music in a certain way, you begin to realize why it's annoyingly something you can't. It's hard to imagine going back to something that doesn't have that easy download, from Qobuz, or the ripping facility from CDs or whatever. It annoyingly does an awful lot of very useful stuff if you're a kind of digital music file, doesn't it?
And I think the proof of the pudding there is there's a hardcore nucleus of Melco followers who are very passionate about their products. This is, I guess, the sort of entry-level product, because they do some very high-end music libraries.
It's certainly a kind of mid-range. It's not their top one.
I think if you aspired to a Melco and you were waiting for a product, this was probably the product you were waiting for. It ticks all the boxes you just said. Sounds great. Does a great job. For me, a couple of quirky features let it down slightly, but hey. It's a niche market product in many ways, which is trying to be a mainstream product.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a super niche actually. It's digital audiophile, isn't it? Who's not sold totally on streaming, or who has a large collection of their own high-res files already and doesn't want to throw that away, and maybe doesn't trust their clunky old Western Digital hard drive they got from Amazon 5 years ago. So there's all that kind of stuff. So it works for a certain clientele. It works brilliantly, and I think you can justify the price for that clientele.
Yes.
But can you justify it for Mr. and Mrs. Average?
Exactly.
No.
And I think not. I think not, because I guess if you're spending that amount of cash, you've got to look at the opportunity cost, haven't you? You've got to look at what you could be buying elsewhere, and it would buy you a great streamer with a hell of a DAC. Ultimately. And this is obviously just sort of half of that. So there we are. That's what it is. Look, I'm going to ask you the question then. So a little bit of an unusual product for us on the Hi-Fi Riffometer, the Mike and Dave Hi-Fi Riffometer. What are you going to give this?
That's really difficult.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
I think for general users of digital music in 2022, it's probably about 7.
Sure.
For people who are absolutely into all of their computer music and files and digital audio files and all the rest of it, it's a 10. So you have to kind of, maybe it's not 10 because it's still too clunky, but it's a 9. But so I'm going to give it 8, but with all the caveats I've just given. How about you?
I think if you were a diehard Melco fan, then it probably would be a 10. Because you don't mind the submenus and the researching things and using a non-native app on your device and all of those things, which bugged me a little bit. I would love to have a really nice, slick app which drives all these things. I don't want to press any of the buttons ever again. I quite like the fact that I could get an external hard drive if I'm running out of space. I love the ripping software and all that stuff. So it does loads and loads of things. However, it does for me have those foibles. I think I'm probably going to go 7.5, and I'll tell you why. Because I think it's actually the price point. Where we are is quite a lot of money to pay for this perceived value for me. But undoubtedly, there'll be a lot of people who think it's wonderful. It sounds great, and it definitely has a place, even if it is quite a niche place in hi-fi market.
It's a sort of hi-fi Lotus sports car, isn't it? In a way,
except it doesn't break down every 10 minutes.
Not lots of trouble, usually serious.
Exactly. And on that note,
exactly on that bombshell.
Quite. Well, there we are. There's the Melco, and it's been a very, very fascinating product to review and listen to. So, thank you for watching this episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, and we'll see you all at the next one. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.